Welcome to Shahnameh, Book of Kings. Today we continue again with the Reign of Ardeshir. Ardeshir assumed the ivory throne in Baghdad and crowned himself there with his sword belt, royal mace, and splendid palace. He was indistinguishable from Gustavus, and from the time on people called him the King of Kings. After he had placed the crown on his head, he gave address from the throne. In this world my treasure is justice, and the world prospers through my efforts and good fortune. No one can take this treasure from me, since evil comes to those who do evil. If the world's God approves of my actions, he will not begrudge me mastery of this dark earth. From end to end the world is in my keeping, and my way is the path of justice. No one, whether he be slave or a free man, must sleep uneasily because of my subordinates, or captains, or cavalry. My court is open to everyone, whether they wish me good or ill. The court called down blessings on him, saying, "May the earth prosper beneath your righteousness." Then he sent armies in each direction to persuade whatever chieftains who might oppose him to submit or face conquest by the sword. When Ardeshir killed Ardavan and grasped the world in his fist, everyone, young and old, rejoiced, since Ardavan had acted tyrannically, and Ardeshir's justice would make the world flourish once again. Ardeshir married the dead king's daughter, hoping that she would reveal to him where her father's treasure was hidden. 2 of Ardavan's sons were in India, enduring both good and bad fortune together. 2 were more in Ardeshir's prisons, their hearts filled with grief, their eyes with tears. The oldest, who was in India, was called Bahman. When he saw that he had lost the whole kingdom, he found a young, persuasive messenger and gave him a package filled with poison. He said, "Go to my sister and say, 'Don't look for kindness from an enemy. You have 2 brothers suffering grievously in India, and 2 more brothers here chained in the dungeons of King Ardeshir. And can you think that heaven will approve of how they're denying you them from their..." Don't look for kindness from an enemy. You have 2 brothers suffering grievously in India, and 2 more brothers here chained in the dungeons of King Ardeshir. And can you think that heaven will approve of how you're now denying them your love? But if you would be Persia's queen, and live admired by all brave men, contrive to give in 1 dose this fell poison that I bring from India to your husband and your king." The envoy arrived at nightfall and gave his message to the princess. She felt pity for his brothers, and her face glowed with sympathy for their plight. Anxiously she took the precious poison, planning to do what her brothers desired. And so it happened that when Ardeshir had spent half of one day hunting wild asses with his arrows, he returned to the palace, and Ardavan's daughter ran to his side. She brought him a goblet encrusted with topazes, in which she had mixed cold water with sugar and wheat meal and the poison, hoping to bring about the end of her brother Bahman's desires. But as Ardeshir took the cup from her, it fell from his hands and smashed on the ground. The princess trembled apprehensively and felt her heart fail within her. Her agitation aroused the king's suspicions, and he wondered what fate the turning heavens had in store for him. He had a servant bring 4 domestic hens and watch them carefully as they pecked up the wheat meal. When he saw that as soon as they ate the food they fell down dead, his suspicions were confirmed. He summoned his chief priest and asked him, "If you were to assign a throne to your enemy, and he became so intoxicated by your kindness that he gratuitously made an attempt on your life, what punishment would you impose on him? What would be the medicine to cure such folly?" The man's answer was, "If a subject stretch out his hands against the king, his head must be severed from his sins, and anyone who advises otherwise should be ignored." The king said, "Take Ardavan's daughter and divide her body from her soul." Trembling and with guilt in her heart, Ardavan's daughter left the audience chamber with the priest. She said to him, "You are a wise man, and know that your days and mine will both come to an end. If you must kill me, know that I am carrying Ardeshir's child. If indeed I'm worthy of the gallows and deserve to have my blood spilt, wait until this child is born. and then do as the king has ordered." The shrewd priest traced his steps and told Ardeshir what she had said. But the king's answer was, "Don't listen to anything she has to say. Take a rope and hang her for her crime." The priest said in his heart, "It is an evil day when the king gives such an order. Young and old, we are all destined for death, and Ardeshir has no son to his name, so that even if he lives for many years, when he dies, his throne will be inherited by his enemies. It would be best if I were to act chivalrously and make something good come from this sad state of affairs. I will deliver this woman from death, and it may be that I can make the king regret his order. And if not, when her child is born, will be the time to attend to his commands. This is not a matter to take lightly, and it is better that I act prudently rather than rashly." He had a place set aside for the princess in his palace, and looked after her as if she were his own flesh and blood. He told his wife, "I shall not be content if even so much as a breath of wind touches her." Then he reflected that there are enemies everywhere, and that all men are thought well of by some and badly by others. He said to himself, "I must arrange matters so that those who would like to slander me won't be able to pour filthy water into my stream." He went into his house, and there cut off his testicles. He then cauterized the wound, applied a salve to it, and bound it up. Pallid and groaning with pain, he quickly put the testicles in salt and placed them in a round jeweler's box, which he immediately sealed. He came into the throne room carrying the sealed box and said, "I ask that the king entrust this to his treasury." The date was written on the box, so that there could be no argument about when this had occurred. When the time for the princess's confinement came, the priests kept everything secret, so that even the winds of heaven knew nothing of what had happened. Ardavan's daughter gave birth to a splendid son, who seemed every inch a royal child. The priest kept visitors away from his house, and had the boy named Shapur. He hid him away for 7 years, and the boy grew into a fine young prince, endowed with far and a noble stature. Then one day the priest, who was also Ardeshir's vizier, saw tears in the sovereign's eyes, and said to him, "May the king prosper, and his thoughts nourish his soul. You have achieved your heart's desire in this world, and driven your enemies back from the throne. Now is the time for rejoicing, and to drink wine, not for troublesome thoughts. The 7 climes of the earth are yours, and the world flourishes because of your justice." The king answered, "My priest, your heart is sincere, and you are privy to all my secrets. My sword has civilized the world. Sorrow, pain, and evil have been driven away. But I am now 51 years old. My musky hair is turned white as camphor, and the roses of my cheeks are faded. I need a son standing here in front of me, someone who charms the world, who is strong and a leader of men. A father without a son is like a son without a father. No stranger will embrace him as his own. After I am gone, my crown and treasure will belong to my enemies. My life's profit will be only dust and sorrow." The old priest said in his heart, "The day to come has to speak. The day to speak has come." And he addressed the king, "Your Majesty, protector of the weak, chivalrous, enlightened, and mighty, if you will now guarantee that my life is safe, I will take this sorrow away from you." The king replied, "You are a wise man. Why should you fear for your life? Tell me what you know. Speak as much as you wish. What is finer than a wise man's words?" The vizier answered, "You have a jeweler's box in your treasury's keeping. Have it brought to us." The king ordered his treasury to bring the box, and said, "Give it back to him so that we may see what is in it, and whether it will enable me to live freed from anxiety." The treasurer brought the box and handed it over. The king asked what was hidden under its seal, and the vizier answered, "My own warm blood in there, and my shameful parts, cut cleanly from my body. You gave Ardavan's daughter into my keeping, saying that you wanted her to be a lifeless corpse. I didn't kill her, because she was pregnant, and I feared God's judgment on me if I did. I disobeyed your orders, But at the same time, I castrated myself so that no one could speak evilly of me and soak me in a sea of infamy. Now your son, Shapur, is 7 years old. No other king has had such a son. He resembles the moon in the heavens. I named him Shapur, and may the heavens smile on your good fortune. His mother is with him and has brought the young prince up." The king was astonished, and he brooded on this child. Finally, he said to the vizier, "You have a good heart and pure thoughts. You have suffered much over this, and I would not have your suffering continue. Find 100 boys of his age and of the same stature, bearing and appearance, dress them all alike, and see there's no difference between them. Then send them to play in the fields and have them play polo there. When the plain is filled with these handsome children, we'll see if my soul responds at the sight of my own boy. My heart will bear witness to the truth of what you have said and acquaint me with my son." At dawn the following day, the vizier had a bevy of boys assembled on the playing fields, all dressed in the same way, and so similar in face and stature that one could not be told from another. The field was like a festival, and somewhere among the participants was the prince, Shapur. The ball was thrown down, and each of the children strove to outdo the others. As dawn broke, Ardeshir arrived at the field, accompanied by his favorite courtiers. He stared at the scene before him and sighed, and then pointing to the boys and said, "Is there an Ardeshir among them?" His vizier answered him, "It is your heart will tell you which is your son." The king said to one of his servants, "Go and get possession of the bowl with your polo stick, and stay with the children and hit the ball towards me. Then we'll see which of them is no respecter of persons, which one is brave enough to come forward and strike the ball before my eyes, outrunning the others like a lion surrounded by horsemen. That one will certainly be my son, born of my line and my loins." The servant did as he was told and hit the ball so that it flew in front of the mounted children. They galloped after it as swiftly as arrows, but when it came close to Ardeshir, they hung back, hesitating, all except Shapur, who swept forward and struck the ball away from his father towards the waiting boy. Ardeshir felt his heart fill with happiness, like that of an old man who has regained his youth. The participants lifted Shapur up and passed him from hand to hand till he reached the king, who folded him in his embrace and called down blessings on him, kissing his head and eyes and face and saying, "A marvel such as you cannot stay concealed. I'd never hoped to see this day. Since in my heart I thought Shapur was dead, but even if a man should lift his head above the sun, he cannot turn aside the will of God, who humbles all our pride. And God has added to my sovereignty by giving my young son, Shapur, to me." He called for jewels, coins, and rubies, and scattered gold, gems, musk, and ambergris over the boy till gold covered the crown of his head, and his face was hidden by jewels. Ardeshir also scattered jewels over his vizier, seated him on a golden throne, and gave him beautiful artifacts to adorn his castle. He had Ardavan's daughter come before him happily and serenely. He pardoned all her past sins and cleansed the stain of guilt from her lovely face. He summoned teachers skilled in the various branches of knowledge to his city, where they taught Shapur how to write in Pahlavi, how to hold a royal audience, how to ride into battle and confront his enemies, the protocols of wine drinking, banquets, and kingly generosities, and how to draw up his army and conduct himself on the day of battle. Ardeshir then had the design of his coins changed. Both the gold coins and those of lesser value on one side was inscribed King Ardeshir, and on the other the name of his vizier, who was honored in this way. The king's letters were signed in the same manner, and the vizier was given the king's seal and authority. Ardeshir distributed wealth to the poor who lived by the labor of their hands, and in a waste place he built the city of Jan Shapur, by which he named it. He always referred to the area. When Shapur had grown into a youth as elegant as a tall cypress tree, Ardeshir feared that someone might cast the evil eye on him. The two were never separated, and Shapur was like another advisor and vizier to his father. But Ardeshir was constantly harassed by wars. He could not spend his time in pleasure because as soon as he had dealt with one enemy, another would raise his head elsewhere. He said, I ask God to tell me what is hidden and what is plain, and whether I can rid the world of my enemies. His wise vizier said to him, I will send someone to Cad, who is a seeker of knowledge, and will help you in such matters. He knows the stars in the high heavens, the way to sovereignty, and the path to ruin. If you are to rule the seven climes with no rival, he will be able to foresee this. He can explain things to you by one without any difficulty, and he will not ask you for payment for his answers. Ardeshir chose a fine, intelligent young man as a messenger. He prepared a gift of horses, cash, and silk for the Indian sage, and said to the young envoy, Go to this knowledgeable man and say to him, Fortunate and inquire as you are, look at the stars and tell me when I can rest from war, and bring these privacies unto my province under my control. If this is to happen, show me how to plan for such a day, and if it is not to be, I'll give you the struggle and stop spending my wealth needlessly. The envoy took the gifts to Cade and told him the secrets of Ardeshir's heart. Cade questioned him and grew pensive. Then he applied himself to his science, consulting the stars, his astronomical tables, his astrolabe, to see what the heavens held of comfort and pride, and of pain and loss. He said to the envoy, I have consulted the stars, as they affect Iran and the king. If he will join his line to that of Merrick, Nuzad, he will rule in peace, and there will be no need for him to send out armies everywhere. His wealth will increase, and his troubles will decrease. Go now, and ignore the enmity between these families. If he does as I have suggested, Iran will flourish, and he will achieve all that he desires. Then Cade gave the envoy a gift and added, Don't keep back anything I've said. If he follows what I've said, the high heavens will smile on him. The envoy returned to Ardeshir and reported what he had been told. But Ardeshir heard his words with pain in his heart, and his face turned sallow with grief. He said to the envoy, My eye never set eyes on any Merrick's family. It would be to bring an enemy off the street into my house, someone intent on destroying me and my people. And then what would be my profit from all of this wealth I have spent on all the armies I've dispatched, all the trials I have undergone? Merrick has one daughter, no more, though no one has ever seen her. I'll have to have her sought in Rome, China, India, Taraz, and when I find her, I'll have her burned alive. I'll make the dust itself weep for her sorrows. He sent horsemen under the command of an ambitious warrior to Jerome, where Merrick's daughter was living. But when she heard of their approach, she escaped from her father's house and hid herself away in a village. There, the local herdsman treated her with respect. Now, like a lovely cypress tree, she grew. Wisdom was hers, and royal glory too. Her wondrous beauty was beyond compare, and rivaled in that land or anywhere. Now, listen to what happened between Merrick's daughter and the valiant warrior Shapur. The king's prosperity flourished, and one day, as dawn broke, he set out to hunt, taking his son Shapur with him. The horseman rode forward, clearing the plain of game, and then came into view a distant village filled with gardens, open spaces, villas, and fine buildings. Shapur rode into the village and dismounted before the headsman's house. There was a lovely garden there, and a young woman, splendid as the moon, came into the courtyard. She let down a bucket into the well, and then caught sight of Shapur. She greeted him respectfully, saying, May the prince live happily for many years, with laughter on his lips, and safe from the world's harms. Your mount must be thirsty, and generally the water in the village is brackish, but the water from this well is cold and sweet. Let me draw some for you. Shapur replied, Your face is so radiant. Why should you be put to such a task? I have servants enough with me to draw the water. The young woman turned away and sat at a distance beside the garden's watercourse. Shapur ordered one of his attendants to draw the bucket up from the well. The man ran forward and strained at the rope, but the full bucket was too heavy to raise. The man's face frowned with the efforts. Shapur came forward and muttered impatiently at him. "You haven't half the strength of a woman. Wasn't a woman letting the bucket down into the well and drawing it up, and you're struggling and straining and begging for help?" He snatched the rope from the man's hand and started to raise the bucket himself. But when he saw what an effort it required, he congratulated the girl and said, "Anyone who can lift a bucket this heavy must come from a noble background." When he raised the bucket, he came forward and said, "May you live forever, prosperous and guided by wisdom, by the grace of Ardeshir, son, Shapur. The water in this well surely turn to milk." Shapur said to this courteous girl, "And how do you know that I am Shapur?" She replied, "I have heard righteous men say often enough, Prince Shapur is a noble cypress tree, a river Nile of generosity, a mammoth in his strength and everything, the image of his father and his king." Shapur said to him, "You are a beautiful young woman. Now answer my question truthfully. Tell me what your lineage is, because there are signs of royalty in your face." She replied, "I'm the headsman's child. That's why I am so pretty and so strong." He answered, "A lie to a prince never prospers. No peasant ever had a daughter as lovely and as bewitching as you are." She said, "O Prince, when I have guarantee that my life is not in danger from the anger of the King of Kings, I shall tell you about my lineage." The prince replied, "In a garden like this, anger between friends doesn't spring up from the grass. Tell me what you have to say, and have no fear of me in your heart, nor of your king, who is a just man." She answered, "In all honesty, I am the daughter of Merrick Nuzad. A wise courtier of his brought me here and gave me to the headsman for safekeeping. He is a good man, and out of fear of the king, I became his servant and drew water for him." Shapur scoured the village until the headsman stood before him and said, "Give this beautiful young woman to me in marriage, and may you be the witness." The man did as he was ordered, and married them according to the fire worshipper's rites. After 9 months, this beautiful woman gave birth to a fine son. From his appearance, you would have thought that he was Esfandiar or Ardeshir. Shapur named him Hormozad, and the boy stood out like a cypress emerging from a swamp. After 7 years, Hormozad had no equal, but he was kept hidden from everyone and was not allowed out to play. King Ardeshir went for a week's hunting, and Shapur accompanied him. Hormozad was tired of his lessons, and he rode out into the king's main square, a bow in one hand and 2 arrows in the other, and met up with a group of children who were playing polo there. Just at that moment, Ardeshir and his entourage returned from the hunt, and a child struck the ball so hard that it came to rest in front of the king. The children hung back, and none of them ran forward to retrieve it, but Hormozad dashed out of the group and snatched up the ball from in front of his grandfather, so that all the soldiers and courtiers began gossiping about him. Then the boy let out a great shout of triumph, which astonished the king, who turned to his chief priest and said, "Find out which family that boy belongs to." The priest made inquiries, but no one knew anything, or if they did, they preferred to remain silent. So the king said, "Pick him up out of the dirt and bring him to me." The prince went and lifted the boy up and brought him to the king and said, "You're a fine little man, and who are we to say your family is?" The boy felt no fear and said loudly, "My name and family should not be hidden. I'm Shapur's son, and he is your son, and my mother is from Merrick's family." The king was astonished at the workings of the world, and he laughed. And there grew pensive. He gave orders that Shapur appear before him, and he questioned him thoroughly. Shapur was afraid. His heart quaked, and his face turned pale. But Ardeshir smiled at his fear and said, "Don't hide your boy away. See that he has everything he's entitled to, so that men say that he is the prince's son." Shapur replied, "May your reign be long and prosperous. He is my child. His name is Hormozad, and he is like a tulip among weeds. I was hiding him from your majesty only until he could show his mettle. He is Merrick's daughter's boy, and I'm quite certain that he is my son." Then he described the meeting at the well and what had happened there, and during his account the king asked him various questions. The king was happy to hear the tale and went off contentedly to his palace, accompanied by his vizier. He took Hormuzad along with him, carrying him in his arms, and in the throne room he had a place prepared for the boy, and gave him a royal torque and a golden crown. They poured gold coins and jewels over the boy until the pile mounted up over his head, and then his grandfather plucked him from the heap, which was distributed to the poor. Ardeshir gave his grandson other valuables, and the fire temple and the room in the palace where the New Year's and Sada celebrations were held were hung with brocade. A hall was prepared for festivities. The country's nobility gathered there, and they were entertained by musicians. Then Ardeshir addressed them. "The words of a wise astrologer cannot be gainsaid. The Indian cad told me that neither I nor this country nor my crown, throne or army would enjoy good fortune unless my lineage were joined in that of Merrick Nuzad's. Now 8 years have passed, and the heavens have turned as the world wished, that is, since Shapur sought his happiness with Merrick's daughter. He has seen nothing but what he desires from the world. The world's 7 climes are now under my command, and my heart has received from the heavens all it has desired." From this time on, the king's functionaries referred to him as the King of Kings. And here is where I end my tale for today. Until tomorrow, when I bring you more tales, many more tales. Until then, my friends,